Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the show that takes your source material, your notes, maybe conversations you've had, your research, and really hands you the knowledge you need, but without, all the extra noise. Today, we are setting the stage somewhere pretty intense. Think pressure cooker, the high-stakes, high-stress world of launching a small business, and specifically, it's a brand new cookie empire in the making.
Right, and this deep dive, it's actually kind of a two-for-one special for you, our listener. We're not just going to analyze the business setup, like the structure of it all. We've actually captured the raw conversation. It's between Susan, she's the owner, and Bob, who is, let's just say, not jumping at the chance to be the manager. He's pretty reluctant.
Reluctant is maybe putting it mildly based on what we see later.
Maybe. But yeah, our sources, they give us this fantastic view into that initial hiring negotiation. It's almost like a masterclass. And at the same time, they just hand us these 10 really essential American English idioms, the kind that act like conversational shortcuts.
Exactly. So that's the mission here. We're going to trace the blueprint of this whole startup conversation. We'll watch how Susan tries to persuade Bob, how Bob pushes back, how he expresses that deep reluctance he's feeling, and we're locking down the strategic purpose behind every single one of those linguistic power plays they use.
Yeah, we want you to understand not just what they said, but why they picked those specific words, those really memorable phrases.
Okay, so where do we start?
Well, we begin right at the foundation of any startup, really. The founder's mindset, the energy, or maybe the lack of restful energy that kind of defines those early days. And the sources, they throw us right in. They introduce us to Susan's state of mind, which, from her own words, was just completely taken over by this new venture.
Right. Let's jump into section 1, Susan's state and the effort required. Okay, so straight away, we get this blast of entrepreneurial anxiety, right? Susan's launching this cookie business. And when Bob greets her, what does she say? She confesses, "I didn't sleep a wink. I was awake all night thinking about the new business." Wow. The stress has definitely already hit her.
It really has, and that instantly defines the emotional intensity, what it takes to launch something new. And that phrase, "not sleep a wink," it's super effective, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's such a definitive way to say you were totally sleepless.
Yeah, it's much stronger than just saying, "Oh, I didn't get much sleep."
Exactly. It implies this mental state where, rest was just physically and psychologically impossible. The definition is pretty literal. Just to be awake all night.
And what's interesting to me is how this idiom, which sounds pretty simple on the surface, really communicates the depth of her focus. Like you said, she wasn't just awake watching TV or, staring at the ceiling. She was actively thinking about the new business. That one phrase, it signals like obsession, commitment, and definitely anxiety. She's sort of laying the groundwork, telling Bob implicitly, look how much commitment this thing needs from someone.
Absolutely. And, the sources give us some really good context here. They show different reasons why someone might not sleep a wink. That helps us kind of grasp the idiom's range. So we have Ted. He couldn't sleep a wink the night before his chemistry test. Why? He was nervous.
Right. Classic anxiety-induced insomnia. That sounds a lot like Susan's startup stress.
It does. It's that mental disruption. But then look at the contrast that the sources give us. There's Jill. Jill drank a big cup of coffee right before bed, so she couldn't sleep a wink either. But why? It was purely physical, right? A stimulant, a clear result of maybe not the best decision.
Yeah, one's mental stress, the other's a physical cause.
And the fact that not sleep a wink can cover both things, high stakes, emotional stuff, and just everyday physical reactions. That makes it incredibly versatile in conversation. It's efficient. It gets across intense disruption quickly.
So for Susan, in this negotiation context, how does it work?
Well, it kind of functions as a vulnerability, doesn't it? She's admitting the personal cost. And surprisingly, that can be a pretty good strategic move. It justifies why she needs reliable help. She's basically saying, look, I'm already running on empty here. I need you.
Okay. That makes sense. And Bob, because he's observant, he picks up on this effort, or maybe the result of her sleeplessness, as soon as he sees her. And he uses a phrase that actually acknowledges her dedication, which brings us nicely to the second key idiom.
Exactly. Bob's opening line, it's strategic, but it's also praise. He says, you're up bright and early this morning, Susan. So the idiom bright and early, it just means early in the morning. Pretty straightforward. But it carries this distinctly positive feeling, doesn't it? It subtly praises Susan, her diligence, her willingness to get going, despite, not sleeping a wink.
It's a very common phrase. I hear it all the time, especially when you're talking about things that need punctuality or, discipline. Think about the example in the source material. If you've got a 7 a.m. flight to Berlin, you don't just wake up early. You have to be up bright and early.
Yeah, the phrase really communicates being prepared, sticking to a tight schedule.
And it ties right back to the cookie business in the other example, too.
It does. The source material reinforces why this routine is necessary. We have lots of cookies to bake, so we'll have to start bright and early tomorrow. It becomes an essential phrase for, like, setting the required schedule, managing expectations for the team, right from day one.
What I find kind of fascinating here is the subtle difference, the choice Bob made. He said bright and early. But the sources also give us a synonym, one that sounds, frankly, a bit more intense: at the crack of dawn.
That's a great point. At the crack of dawn. If Susan had said she was up at the crack of dawn, it might have sounded more like, exhaustion.
Or hardship.
Yeah, like she was forced into it. Precisely. At the crack of dawn suggests the absolute earliest possible moment, right? That precise line between night and day. It sounds, well, grueling. Bright and early, though. It sounds energetic, proactive, almost cheerful, despite the early hour.
So Bob is choosing a phrase that complements her commitment.
Exactly. Rather than one that emphasizes, the pain of getting up so early, it keeps the vibe of the interaction positive, even though they're about to dive into the topic of some really intense labor.
And that intensity, that labor, is exactly where Bob pivots next. He sees her dedication, okay, but he shifts from praise to, like, a challenge. He wants to make sure she really understands the scale of commitment involved. And this leads us to maybe the most visceral metaphor in this whole opening exchange.
Yeah, this is the warning shot. Bob introduces that central conflict of being an entrepreneur, doesn't he? He says, running your own business is lots of work. Are you prepared to work like a dog?
Oof, to work like a dog. That phrase just lands with real force, doesn't it? It's not just working hard. It conjures up this image of relentless, exhausting, maybe even slightly subservient labor.
The definition is simple enough, just means to work very hard. But the connotation, yeah, it speaks to that kind of effort that's driven by necessity or maybe really high demand, often without complaining much, like a loyal dog.
So Bob's using this to really probe Susan. Is she truly prepared for what she's getting into?
Exactly. Is she ready for that total commitment that defines startup life? The 80-hour weeks, the constant grind. And this is where the source material is just fantastic, because it gives us this whole catalog of synonyms that really deepen the impact of this idea, this overwhelming effort.
All right, we got 3 really strong alternatives here. To work one's tail off, to work like a horse, and to work one's fingers to the bone. We should probably unpack those a little, shouldn't we? They feel slightly different.
Definitely. Let's start with to work like a horse. What does that suggest? To me, it implies sheer physical endurance, like pulling power, that kind of steady, relentless effort you need to haul something huge over a long time. It's about stamina.
Okay, stamina. Then to work one's tail off, that feels more, I don't know, colloquial, high energy.
Yeah, I'd agree. Communicates pure maximum exertion, just going flat out.
And then the last one, to work one's fingers to the bone. That sounds painful. It speaks directly to, like, physical repetitive grind, doesn't it?
It really does. Manual labor, sheer exhaustion that leaves you physically just depleted. And Susan's cookie business. Standing, mixing, packaging. Yeah, that could definitely qualify as fingers to the bone work.
Looking at the examples in the sources helps make it concrete. There's the investment banker who, after college, now works like a dog. That's a field known for insane hours.
Right. Or the student who worked like a dog on their term paper and aced it got an A+ game. In both cases, the extreme effort is presented as, like, the non-negotiable price for success. You have to do it.
But here's where Susan pulls off a bit of negotiation genius, I think. This is the point where she turns Bob's warning completely around on him. Bob expects her to say, yes, I'm ready. I'll work like a dog.
But she doesn't. She pivots.
Yeah.
She just admits it straight up, no, and then immediately follows with, but I am prepared to hire you to run the business.
That's the critical connection, isn't it? The strategic move hidden right there in the conversation. Susan takes Bob's point about extreme labor, the need to work like a dog, and uses it as the immediate, undeniable reason for hiring him.
She's delegating the dog work instantly. It's brilliant.
She's basically telling him, thanks for the warning about how hard this is. Now you can handle that part for me.
It is
incredibly smooth. And it just completely shifts the focus of the conversation away from Susan's capability and onto Bob's potential role.
And that moves us perfectly from setting the scene, the business stakes and Susan's mindset, right into the next phase.
Yeah.
Bob's pretty forceful initial refusal.
Okay, so Susan has just dropped this potentially massive management job onto Bob, and her whole justification relies on him accepting the work like a dog level of effort required. Bob's reaction, it's not just negative, it's like swift, absolute, and really expressive.
Oh, yeah. He hits back at her proposal with our next crucial idiom, and it's a linguistic blast, really, of strong refusal. Susan asks him to run a cookie business, and Bob just replies, "Fat chance."
Fat chance, wow. That's aggressive, isn't it? It's not polite. It's definitely not a gentle, no thank you.
Not at all. It's an idiom used specifically to express really strong rejection or impossibility. The definition is just definitely not. But its function. It's to convey disbelief and a firm, almost insulted kind of denial that something could ever happen.
So in the negotiation, it's like he's throwing up a huge conversational roadblock.
Totally. Bob isn't just saying he's not interested. He's saying the chance of this happening, zero, absolutely zero. The sheer finality of it. It feels like he's trying to shut the whole conversation down right there before Susan can even mention things like salary or benefits.
The synonyms that the source material gives us really underline how extreme this phrase is. We're talking never in a million years and no way.
Exactly. These are declarations of absolute, total impossibility. If you were a negotiation strategist analyzing this, you'd say Bob is establishing an extremely high anchor of refusal. He's starting from absolutely not, maybe hoping to get maximum concessions if he eventually agrees to anything.
And the examples provided, they really help understand the emotional weight, that social one. Dana, the girl who's always laughed at by boys. Will she be invited to the school dance? Fat chance.
Yeah, that underlines a really obvious kind of crushing social impossibility. It reflects the absurdity Bob feels about him being hired for this job.
And then the other example, the proprietary one. Someone asks to borrow your brand new car to drive across the country.
Fat chance. Right. That situation involves something high value, high risk. The request itself seems absurd. And Bob sees Susan's offer him managing a cookie business with zero experience as equally absurd, equally impossible for him.
It's a bold opening move from Bob, but like you said, in a negotiation starting with such an aggressive rejection, it forces the other person, Susan, in this case, to immediately justify why they even made the offer.
Precisely. Which brings us directly to Bob's rationale. Why did he say fat chance? He needs to back it up.
And his defense, it's total ignorance. He deploys it immediately after the refusal. He tells Susan, I don't have a clue about making cookies. I don't even know how to turn the oven on.
Right, to not have a clue. That's his shield. It's clean, simple, and utterly definitive. It means to know nothing about. Bob's drawing a really clear line here. His lack of technical expertise, that's his main objection. He's saying he's completely unqualified for the core function of the actual baking.
And phrasing it so dramatically, I don't even know how to turn the oven on. He really elevates his ignorance, doesn't he? It's not just lack of knowledge, it's like functional incompetence.
Mm-hmm. Makes the job offer seem almost reckless on Susan's part.
And the sources, they back this up with these relatable scenarios, like the person who talks a big game about working at McDonald's.
Yeah, but the truth is, he doesn't have a clue about making hamburgers. Perfect illustration of that gap between maybe reputation and actual skill.
Or the second one, just pure everyday tech frustration. Someone asks, can you fix this broken printer? And the answer is a flat, no, I don't have a clue.
Confirms absolute zero knowledge. So for Bob, that cookie oven, it's just as complex, just as inaccessible as a broken printer. He's telling Susan, you've fundamentally misunderstood my skill set.
Okay, so Bob's argument, based on his technical ignorance, it seems pretty strong. But Susan, maybe because she anticipated needing a manager, not a baker, she had a counter move ready.
She did. She immediately dismisses his concern about the knowledge gap. She offers a solution that introduces our next idiom.
She just says, simply, I'll give you a crash course.
And that is a managerial and linguistic masterstroke, really. A crash course.
Yeah.
What is it? It's defined as short and intensive instruction.
Right. Quick.
Exactly. The brilliance is in that word crash. It implies speed, urgency, focused necessity. It's the complete opposite of like a long drawn-out degree or some formal apprenticeship. This is emergency education, designed to quickly give someone just enough functional knowledge.
So it instantly diffuses that not having a clue objection. Susan's basically saying, your problem, it's temporary, I can fix it fast.
Yeah, I can fix it in a weekend, almost. And this concept, it's so applicable today, isn't it, in our fast-paced world. The source material shows how versatile it is.
Like Joan's son giving her a couple of hours, a crash course on using the internet. That's essential knowledge now, delivered efficiently.
Shows how quickly functional knowledge can transfer. And then there's that more unusual example, the romantic one.
Oh, yeah. The date turned educational opportunity. Rachel goes out with an auto mechanic, and he gives her a crash course on changing her oil.
Right, so it confirms a crash course works for anything from, like, cutting-edge tech skills to basic car maintenance, and now, apparently, managing a cookie business.
So the function of the idiom here is purely strategic. Neutralize Bob's main objection.
Exactly. But the success of this countermove, it really hinges on one crucial detail, a detail Bob immediately picks up on and needs to clarify. He asks, do I have to do the baking?
Ah, that's the pivotal question, isn't it? Bob's testing the limits. What exactly is this crash course about? Is he learning to bake or is he learning to manage?
And Susan confirms the pivot. She solidifies her strategy right there. No, you'll just manage the business side.
Okay, confirmation received. That's vital.
Absolutely vital. The crash course isn't about flour and sugar consistency. It's about inventory, cash flow, scheduling, maybe supplier relations. The business stuff. Bob doesn't need to be a baker. He needs to be an administrator, a manager. So by removing that technical hurdle he used as a shield, Susan basically forces Bob into considering the management role.
Yeah.
And the whole negotiation now turns on his willingness to accept that risk, that responsibility.
Right. So his technical objection is effectively gone.
Yeah.
But the speed of this whole negotiation, the intensity, it leaves Bob, understandably, in a bit of a state. He's conflicted, which transitions us perfectly into the final section of their chat.
Okay, so Bob has moved past that initial stage of just absolute refusal. We're not going to hear fat chance again.
Probably not, no.
But he hasn't jumped straight into, like, enthusiastic acceptance either. He pauses, he summarizes his internal struggle, which really shows his analytical side, I think, and he uses our next key idiom to do it.
Right. He starts by framing his emotions, setting the stage, and then he delivers the verdict. Needless to say, I have mixed feelings about working for you.
Let's look at that core phrase first. To have mixed feelings. This is such a useful tool in conversation, isn't it? For conveying psychological nuance.
Yeah, definitely.
It defines that state where you feel positive about one part of something, but negative about another part all at the same time. Bob's basically telling Susan, look, I see the pros and the cons here, and right now they feel pretty balanced.
That sophistication is important, I think. If he just said, I'm unsure, it would sound, well, vague, weak, maybe. But mixed feelings, that forces Susan to acknowledge, yeah, this is a complex decision he's facing.
Exactly. And we can kind of speculate, can't we? What's on Bob's internal scorecard? The
Yeah.
positive column. Probably the opportunity itself, the challenge, maybe the title manager, a new environment.
Okay, yeah. And the negative column.
Well, probably anchored by Susan herself, right? Her intensity. Remember, she didn't sleep a wink. Her audacity offering him the job after he said fat chance.
Oh.
And just the sheer risk of managing a brand new startup, which, as he pointed out, might require him to work like a dog.
The source material does a brilliant job exploring this duality. That house guest example is great. I had mixed feelings when they decided to stay another week.
Right. The positive side is spelled out. I enjoyed hanging out with them. But the negative side, the burden, I was tired of cooking for them. The idiom just perfectly captures the equal weight of those two opposing emotions pulling at the speaker.
Or the professional example, the company president. Having mixed feelings about him, it means balancing the good
He's good with the clients.
against the bad.
He's nasty to his employees.
Uh,
Yeah. In all these cases, the phrase gives you a much more sophisticated way to respond than just saying yes or no. It lets Bob communicate, hey, Susan, this is complicated for me.
but here's the really strategic part, I think. It's how Bob chose to frame that verdict. He didn't just say, I have mixed feelings. He led into it with, needless to say.
Ah, yes. Our next key phrase. And it functions like a verbal signpost, doesn't it? A framing device. It signals that whatever follows is, well, the obvious conclusion given everything that just happened. Needless to say is defined simply as obviously.
So Bob's asserting a bit of conversational dominance here.
I think so, yeah. By leading with this phrase, he's suggesting that his hesitation, his mixed feelings, should be perfectly apparent to Susan after the whirlwind discussion they just had. You know, the strong refusal, the sudden job description change, her intense approach, all of it.
It's subtle, but it is a power play. He's kind of forcing her to agree with his emotional state. Like if she were to challenge his mixed feelings, she'd be challenging something presented as an obvious truth.
Exactly. It carries that same rhetorical weight as its fantastic synonym.
Yeah.
It goes without saying.
And the source material gives us strong examples of how, needless to say, frames an undeniable truth or consequence. The first one links it directly to personal responsibility. Got a test tomorrow morning. Then,
Needless to say, you can't stay out late tonight. The consequence just flows logically, inescapably from the premise.
And the second example about poor planning, always a relatable theme. Waiting until Christmas Eve to do your shopping.
Yeah. Needless to say, the stores are going to be very crowded. It's an obvious, unavoidable result. So Bob uses this phrase to basically assert that his current emotional state, his mixed feelings, is the obvious and justified outcome of the high-pressure, rapid-fire negotiation they just finished.
Okay. So Susan realizes Bob is still kind of teetering, right? He's on the fence. He needs reassurance. So she pivots again, moves away from technical stuff and towards emotional encouragement. She needs to address that underlying negative feeling hinted at by his mixed feelings. And she pulls out some classic, upbeat slang, trying to seal the deal.
Yeah, she attempts to offer him an emotional anchor, basically, a promise of satisfaction. She says, "I'll be nice. I promise you'll be a happy camper."
Happy camper. Okay, that's defined simply as, a happy person, a satisfied participant. It sounds approachable, casual slang, suggests contentment, ease, enjoying your situation. Susan's promising Bob workplace happiness.
But this is where digging into the linguistic nuance is absolutely critical, the source material. It includes a really crucial high-impact note about this phrase.
Oh, what's
It
that?
says this expression is usually used in the negative, as in not a happy camper.
Whoa, okay. That is a fascinating linguistic insight. So it means Susan's making a promise that actually runs counter to how the idiom normally works in conversation.
Pretty much. The standard setting for the phrase implies unhappiness, misery, dissatisfaction. So she isn't just promising happiness, she's promising a state of satisfaction that's kind of statistically rare, at least within the context of how this slang is typically used.
Let's look at the source examples again. They should confirm this negative idea.
They do. Linda, her passport got stolen in Florence. Situation. She was not a happy camper. That's genuine objective misery right there.
Definitely not happy. And the second one is taking 5 really hard courses this semester.
So, he's not a happy camper, right? The difficult workload makes happiness seem unlikely. Stress is the default state.
So Susan's promise, it's not trivial at all. It's actually quite audacious.
It really is. She's stating with confidence that Bob will be one of those rare few who does qualify as a happy camper, even in this high-stress startup environment she's creating. It's a bold rhetorical move. It's designed to conquer his mixed feelings by directly contrasting his likely perceived future misery with her guarantee of satisfaction.
And does it work?
It seems to. Having kind of exhausted his objections and having received maybe the highest level of emotional reassurance Susan could offer using that idiom, Bob finally accepts the challenge. He moves from hesitation to commitment.
Yeah.
And he uses our final idiom for today, which signals that transition from thinking about it to actually doing it.
Right. He delivers the final agreement, wraps up the negotiation. Okay, let's give it a shot, boss.
To give it a shot means simply to try something. It's the phrase of commitment, isn't it? The linguistic signal that says, okay, I'm taking the plunge. Moving past the analysis into action. It marks the moment Bob accepts the job, accepts the title of manager, even if it's just on a trial basis initially.
The synonyms provided reinforce that idea too. To give it a try. To try one's hand at something. It suggests maybe lower stakes testing first before you go all in with full commitment.
Exactly. And the sources give us these delightfully contrasting examples, showing the sheer range of things you might give a shot to.
Yeah.
On the simple low-stakes end, you might give it a shot, trying to open a really tightly closed jar for someone. Quick task, minimal effort.
Okay. But then we have the really unusual example. High uncertainty, questionable execution. Home brewing.
Yes. I've never tried to make wine in my bathtub before, but perhaps I'll give it a shot. The bathtub wine example is just fantastic because it perfectly captures that spirit of trying something new, something uncertain, something potentially disastrous.
Which sounds like a fitting analogy for managing a brand new cookie startup where the owner was just up all night worrying about it.
It really does.
Yeah.
Now, what's vital here is the contrast. The source material also gives us a related phrase, to give it one's best shot.
Ah, right. That sounds different.
It means something different. That variant means to try as hard as you possibly can. It implies maximum effort, full commitment. We see that example used for like a job interview. Just give it your best shot. Put everything into it.
But Bob doesn't say that, does he? He just says, let's give it a shot.
He doesn't. And that's a subtle, but I think highly significant distinction. He's committing to try the venture, yes, to test the waters, but he's not necessarily committing to that maximum working like a dog level of effort just yet.
So he's reserving judgment, Keeping some energy back.
Possibly. Keeping his mixed feelings in check, maybe. Maintaining a potential exit strategy if Susan fails to deliver on her big promise that he'll be a happy camper.
Okay, so the negotiation's done. The linguistic fate of the cookie business is sealed. Well, at least for now. Bob has agreed to try. And Susan, she has successfully delegated the intense startup labor she was worried about. Hashtag tag outro. Wow. What a phenomenal journey just through that single critical conversation. It really shows how much can happen linguistically in a short space. We started with Susan's anxiety, right? Communicated through not sleeping a wink, and her dedication showing up bright and early, which then led Bob to warn her about the intense effort needed, the work like a dog part.
Yeah, and that warning, that was the key, wasn't it? Susan just leveraged it immediately to justify hiring Bob. Bob fought back hard with Fat Chance. He pleaded ignorance, saying he didn't have a clue. But Susan skillfully neutralized that expertise objection by offering a quick, focused crash course.
Right. And once that barrier was gone, Bob had to admit his inner turmoil. He framed his hesitation perfectly by saying, needless to say, I have mixed feelings. And Susan closed the deal with that really audacious promise that he'd be a happy camper, which finally led Bob to take the plunge and agree to give it a shot.
The sources just gave us such a powerful combination here. On one hand, small business strategy, effective delegation, neutralizing objections, and on the other hand, really expressive, concise language. These 10 idioms, they were the precise tools that made that whole conversation so effective, so immediate. Think about the efficiency game. Bob saying, fat chance, instead of having to launch into some long explanation about why he wouldn't take the job, it's instant communication.
It illustrates exactly why using specific idiomatic language is like a shortcut. It helps you be well-informed and highly articulate at the same time. These phrases, from the emotional punch of not sleeping a wink to the definitive finality of needless to say, they convey complex ideas, complex emotional states way more efficiently than just plain language often can. So now you, our listener, you have the definition, the context, and the strategic function for each of these tools.
And having that knowledge, it really elevates your communication, doesn't it? It goes beyond just transactional exchanges. It lets you be truly expressive. It allows you to signal things like sincerity or extreme effort or absolute refusal or maybe nuanced doubt, all with just a single memorable phrase.
Absolutely. So you now have 10 really high-impact tools ready in your linguistic toolkit, tailored directly from seeing them used in a real-world, pretty high-stakes negotiation.
Which brings us nicely to our final provocative thought for you today. Something for you to kind of chew on, pulling together those themes of risk and commitment we've been analyzing. We know Bob started out with pretty strong mixed feelings about this whole venture, right? And he only agreed after getting the offer of a crash course. And even then, he only agreed to give it a shot.
And Susan, remember, she made that bold promise he'd be a happy camper, going against the idiom's usual negative vibe.
Right. So let's fast forward in our minds, maybe 6 months down the line. The pressure of the cookie business is really, truly setting in. Which of the idioms we talked about today do you think Bob will be using most often then? Will he find himself still feeling like he doesn't have a clue, maybe desperately wishing he could quit? Will Susan's intense schedule, the demands of the business, force him to realize he really is working like a dog, maybe regretting he ever agreed in the first place? Or, just maybe, against all the linguistic odds, against all the usual startup pressure, will Susan's promise actually hold true? Will Bob be excitedly telling everyone how much he loves his job, confirming that he is indeed one of those rare, genuine, happy campers?
The fate of the small business, and maybe Bob's day-to-day happiness, it seems to hinge entirely on whether he can manage that stress he initially warned Susan about. We really hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the power of persuasion and the incredible efficiency of English idioms.